Hey, it's Dr. Darren Schmidt. So we're going to go over LDL cholesterol and this video from Dr. Greger. How do we know that cholesterol causes heart disease? So we're starting at 36 seconds in, and let's just get started.
We know LDL, so-called bad cholesterol, plays a central role in the initiation, development, and progression of our number one killer. Over 100 prospective studies involving more than 1 million people have demonstrated that those with higher LDL levels are at higher risk.
So I'm just battering this. This is epidemiological right here. We're saying over 1 million people have been studied in observational studies, and it shows that higher LDL leads to higher cardiovascular risk. Now, I'm going to go over some numbers here, and he does not give you the numbers. But I looked up the studies that are coming up, and I'm going to give you the numbers. Okay, I'm not a fan of epidemiological studies, but vegans are, because that's the foundation of their science.
It seems reasonable to assume that if lowering cholesterol later in life can help, then keeping LDL levels low early in life may prevent our arteries from getting clogged in the first place. But let's not just assume. It would be considered unethical to set up a controlled clinical trial in which young adults with elevated serum cholesterol levels were treated or not treated over their lifetime.
So what he's saying is, like, he's bringing in this idea that we need to detect high cholesterol at younger and younger ages so they can go on statin drugs or go on a vegan diet and lower their LDL, total cholesterol, whatever, so that when they're 60 and 70, they're not having heart problems. So what he's saying is that you can't give somebody a bunch of bacon and follow them for 40 years and see if they have a heart attack sooner than if they didn't have the bacon. But there is a way. That's a trial. That's an experiment. That's not epidemiological. You actually, in this example, you're actually doing something to a group of people, and it has been done. You can do a trial. You can test meat, and you can test bacon. You can test fat and butter, and they've done this with the Women's Health Initiative, where they had two groups of people, and they told one group to lower your meat intake by 20%, and they followed them for years. And the people that reduced their meat intake by 20% did not have a reduction in heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. So that one study negates these million people in the epidemiological studies. This one study shows that meat does not cause these diseases. So what he's saying right here is invalid.
Just like you couldn't ethically set up a study in which half the kids are made to start smoking to see if smoking really does cause lung cancer.
Now that's a true statement, so then you have to default back to the observational studies, which he does.
That's where observational studies come in. You can follow people who already smoke and compare their disease rates to those that don't. It's like 40 years ago when the president of the American Heart Association tried to argue that we should all stop smoking, even though there were no randomized controlled trials. Look, those who smoke have a higher risk of heart attack. The more we smoke, the higher the risk, and after we stop, our risk drops.
So let's show you the numbers on this. All right, here we have cigarettes. Now with this study, it says cigarette smoking and lung cancer. These are epidemiological compilations. And I'm just going to scroll down. I'm just going to read this off to you, and I'll explain it. And what we're looking at is called OR, which stands for odds ratio. Now in these studies we have OR, HR, and RR. HR stands for hazard ratio, RR stands for relative risk. It's basically a number that anything above 1.0 is indicative of danger. Now if the number is at between 1.0 and 2.0, you can basically ignore it because it's not really that big of a deal. But if you get above 2 and above 3, now you have to send that study, these epidemiological studies, to a trial. Okay, I'm talking like in the nutrition world, there's a lot of studies that show that eating meat, for example, may give you a relative risk or an OR or an HR of like 1.3, for example. That doesn't mean you have to avoid the meat. But when it comes to cigarettes, here are the numbers. Now, remember in nutrition, I said 2 and 3. So I'm going to say this, I'm going to read it off to you. Current male smokers with an average daily dose of greater than 30 cigarettes had ORs of 103.5. For squamous cell carcinoma, 111.3, and for a small cell lung carcinoma, 21.9. Remember, that is not 2. These are huge numbers. So yeah, with these epidemiological studies, it is showing that cigarette smoking is very dangerous. In women, the corresponding ORs were 62.7, 108.6, and 16.8. So those are crazy high, and it makes sense to take this information and say, quit smoking. So let's continue on with this.
The same can be said for high cholesterol. If you look at young men aged 18 through 39.
All right, let's look at this study. In the upper left corner, it's very faint. It says JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, July 19th, 2000. The title is Relationship of Baseline Serum Cholesterol Levels in 3 large cohorts. Cohort means group. It's just another epidemiological study. 3 large cohorts of younger men to long-term coronary, cardiovascular, and all-cause mortality, and to longevity. So let's look at this study. I pulled it up. I'm going to give you the numbers because the numbers are not in this video. And here it is from University of Minnesota. And I'm going to read off to you the numbers. I highlighted them right here. CHD, coronary heart disease mortality risk, was 2.15 to 3.63 times greater. Not 111, 2. CVD disease, cardiovascular disease mortality risk was 2.1 to 2.8. All-cause mortality was 1.3 to 1.49. So you can basically ignore this until they do the randomized control trial, which they've done, which I just explained, which showed that meat is not a problem. So let's go back to the video.
And follow them for up to 34 years. Cholesterol levels, even when you're young, predicts long-term risk of heart disease and death. Men in their 20s and 30s who have a total cholesterol even just under 200 have a substantially longer estimated life expectancy, around 4 to 9 years longer.
This is based on epidemiology. You can't validly say that this is a true statement, that you would live 4 to 8 years longer
Than those over 240. Evidence from observational studies, however, is vulnerable to so-called confounding factors. Eating a diet plant-based enough to lower cholesterol below average may add years to our lives regardless of what our cholesterol is. Ideally.
So remember this. He's saying that there's other confounders in an epidemiological study. And I've mentioned this before. You can have financial stress. You can have emotional stress. You can have various genetics, like people with certain genetic traits or genetic traits because of their traditional culture, like where they were born. These kind of things matter. You can have a genetic SNP that causes multiple factors in your physical expression of your body.
We'd have a long-term randomized controlled trial, and nature may have actually set one up for us. Each of us, at conception, gets a random assortment of genes from our mother and our father. And some of those genes may affect our cholesterol levels. Just like there's rare genetic mutations that result in unusually high cholesterol, there are rare genetic mutations that lead to unusually low cholesterol.
So what we have here is with these people with these genetic SNPs, it lowers their LDL cholesterol, and they have protection against coronary heart disease. And the numbers look really good. But my question is, what other factors play into this genetic SNP? What other positive benefits do they have from it? So there's some questions I have about this, and it's not answered in this video. I don't know if anybody has this answer. But if you have this genetic SNP and it automatically lowers your LDL despite a bad diet, despite smoking and drinking, and despite diabetes, does this genetic SNP also increase the strength of your immune system so that you don't get little infections in your arteries, which can cause arterial damage? Does it also keep your vitamin K levels up? Vitamin K2 is super important to keep your arteries clean. Does it also protect you from glycation? So you eat a bunch of sugar, and the sugar is damaging to your arteries. That process is called glycation. Does this genetic SNP protect your arteries from the sugar? So I wouldn't say that lowering LDL genetically, like these lucky people, I don't know if it's just the LDL. Maybe there's other things going on. So that's my message here. With the rest of this video, he goes on about this genetic SNP and that Mother Nature set up this randomized control trial. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And I'm poking holes in multiple arguments here that LDL cholesterol, total cholesterol, is the cause of heart disease. Now, you can have high LDL, certainly, and you get heart disease, but there's all these other factors that I'm going to go into in a future video. I'll do it live in my office. I'll post it soon. And if you like this information, please give me a thumbs up, share, and subscribe. I'm just trying to sort out the confusion. I'm helping you understand when it comes to the standard thought process of LDL cholesterol, low fat, vegan, vegetarian, animal protein is bad. There are so many things in that camp. There's so many incorrect thoughts. There's so much incorrect data, missing data, false data, data that's overblown to be important when it's not really important. It's just like sentence after sentence, I'm debunking this stuff. So anyways, please share, and if you're new, hit subscribe and hit the bell for notifications.